this video, we're going to try and apply the code injection techniques that we learned in the previous video to a real game, Cave Crawler. Don't worry if you didn't see the previous video, but I will try to go through this a bit quicker, so if it's not making sense, you can go back and check part 1. As usual, we'll make sure we're connected to the correct process. In this case, it's cavecrawler.exe. We'll go and start the game, tutorial, and we can move around here. We can start searching for values. I'm going to pick up some points here, so let's actually, just for fun, let's change this to 0 for our first scan, and we'll look for this score at the top. It's not really related to what we're trying to do here, but why not? There we go, we pick up 10 points, and then we'll go next scan. You can see it's taken quite a while, it's still dealing with the previous results, and then we'll increment that again, so now it's 20. Next scan, and now we've only got one result left, so we know this is our score. So we can open this up, we can change this and say that's the score. We could change the color if we wanted, but I'll just leave it at that. And let's change our score to 1337. And you can see that's updated. We could also click this active button to say that we don't want that to change. Every time we pick up these points, we want the score to stay at what it's already at. And essentially what this is doing whenever we have that active, it's just constantly writing that value. So even if the game updates it, we'll quickly overwrite it. So that's all good. Now let's go and do what we did previously whenever we looked at Cave Crawler, where we first of all want to search for our health. You can see in the top left, we've got 4, so I'm going to do an initial scan for 4, jump up, take some damage, it's down to 3, we'll do our next scan. I'm going to do that again, so it's down to 2, still got 2 results, alright, we'll do it again. And there we go, we've got 1 result. We can change this to our health, and I better increment this before I die. So I'm going to change that to 10. And again, we could freeze this, we could have this and then say every time we jump, even though it takes away the health, you see that it very quickly comes back. And you could actually, if you wanted to see that happen a bit quicker, you could go to Enable Speed Hack and actually slow the game down, as you'll quite often need to do when working with Cheat Engine. But in this case, we want to inject some code. So let's right click this and say, what accesses this address? It pops up and we've got this count constantly going up for one of the instructions. Let's see what happens whenever we take some damage. You can see we get 3 more here. So every time we take damage, each one of these instructions will be executed. And as we go through them, we can see that the instruction here is a move operation, but we can also see what instruction is going to occur next. And this one has a subtract, which sounds interesting because we know the health is, there's a subtract operation occurring. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a subtract, it could be a move operation or something as well, but that's definitely worth looking at. If we check the other ones, we've got a jump after this one, and this one we've got the compare. So probably the subtract instruction will be interesting to take a look at. Let's go into the disassembler. And one thing we could do here would be to just simply change this subtract and change that to add. Click OK, and then we'll go back to the game. And look, whenever we take damage, instead we're actually gaining 1 bar each time. So that's pretty cool, but that's not code injection. So let's change this back to sub. Hit OK, we'll double check, make sure that's acting as it should, so it's now decrementing the health. And right before the subtract instruction we have this move, so let's try and work out what's going on. First of all, it's moving a value into the RDX. That value is being loaded from the RDI plus 08. So remember, these square brackets indicate it's a pointer. So there is an address held in the RDI, and if we add 8 to that, that's the offset which is being loaded here, and the value in that address is being moved into the RDX. And then the next operation is subtracting the value which is pointed to by the RSI plus an offset of 8 into the RDX, or by the RDX. So essentially, it looks like what's happening here is it's moving our health into the RDX, and then it's subtracting 1 from our health. So presumably, this RSI plus 08 holds 1, because every time we take damage, it subtracts 1. So let's try and inject some code. Let's do our auto assemble. We can do Control and A. And we want to save this in Cheat Engine. So I'm going to first of all do the cheat table framework code, and then I'm going to do code injection. Remember, if I'm going through this a bit fast, just go back and double check the previous episode if you didn't see that, because I went through it a little bit more slowly. Okay, so here is our original code. We can see what's happening. It's subtracting what is presumably our 1 being subtracted from the RDX, which is holding our health. So what we could do, there's various things we could do here, but let's just say we're gonna actually set the RSI plus 08 to 0. So we could say move, and then remember the first thing is our destination, so that's our destination, and then our source comes after it. So afterwards we'll say 0, And this is basically saying we want to move 0 into the address pointed to by the RSI plus the offset of 8. And then it means that whenever we get down to original code, what it's subtracting the RDX by, which holds our health, is actually 0. So we can save this as our, let's assign it to the cheat table. Let's close that down, let's stop all this. And let's try and tick this. We're going to take damage, and it's not taking any damage. So that's good, it worked. However, what happens now if we disable this? Still not taking any damage. This is less than ideal for a couple of reasons. Firstly, you might only want to enable invincibility to get past a certain boss in the game, and don't want it enabled at all times. Secondly, if there's any shared code between the enemy players and your character, it means that enabling and disabling this is not going to remove the invincibility from the enemy players. So you essentially will never have any way to kill the enemy player unless you actually right click and go in and change the script, change this back to a 1, and then run the script again. And the reason for that is that there was nothing to actually change what was in this address again. So if we have this move in 0 into the RSI plus 8, then there's nothing which is actually going to move a 1 back in there whenever we disable the script. So we could actually add something to do that whenever it disables, or we could rethink our approach. So as always, there are multiple ways that we could do this, and another way that we could do it would simply be to add a 1 to the RDX here. So let's change that to add a 1. In fact, let me just go back. I didn't actually execute this. Let's go back. Let's enable that again. There we go. It's now taking health. Okay, so we'll go and change the script, and yeah, we'll change this to add 1 to the RDX. So what's going to happen now when we take damage? First, it's going to add 1 to the RDX, which is our total health. And then it's going to subtract 1 from our total health. So essentially it's not going to do anything. And it means that if we go to OK now, and we'll enable this, we'll jump into these little damage square things, and it's not taking any health. But now whenever we disable this, it's taking damage. And the reason being, in this case, there is no, let me go back to the script. In this case, there is no pointer, so we're not actually writing to any address. We're only saying, if the cheat is enabled, then we want you to add 1 to the health before you take 1 from the health. Whereas if the cheat is disabled, it simply won't call this. In the previous example, that didn't matter. It didn't matter if we didn't call the move operation again because 0 had already been moved into that address. Hopefully that makes sense. As I say, there are many ways to do this, and we'll look at more in future. Let me turn on our invincibility and let's go and play a bit of the game. I also want to fix the jump at some point so that we can jump multiple times rather than only jumping once. Alright, so we've got invincibility. We jump in here, we're not actually taking any damage, but if I go and start trying to shoot at this enemy player now, they're not taking damage either. And that's because of the shared code thing we mentioned. So what we'll need to do in a future video, I think 2 or 3 videos from now, we'll try to change this. You can see that we're not taking any damage, but the enemy player isn't taking any. But because we can toggle the script now, I can toggle that off and then kill the enemy player and then turn our invincibility back on. Again, they're invincible. I'll wait for it to turn its back. I'll turn off invincibility, kill the player, and then turn it back on. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Didn't really do anything too complex with the code injection. We basically just recreated exactly what we saw in the cheat engine tutorial. In the next video, we'll look at multi-level pointers, so going back to what we were looking at in, not the last video, but the video before. Again, if you miss any of the videos in the series, don't worry too much about it. It's only if you get confused in the middle of one of the videos and you're not sure what I'm talking about, then it's a good idea to go back and check the series. Also, all the videos done by Guided Hacking, Stephen Chapman, are really, really high quality. I definitely recommend checking them out, even if you are following this series as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks.